Maya Thomas walked down her neighborhood sidewalk in a quiet suburban town in Georgia. Her ponytail swayed as she skipped between chalk-drawn hopscotch squares, her cheerful laugh echoing in the warm afternoon sun. Nearby, neighbors waved and smiled as they trimmed their hedges or watered flower beds. Maya's joy was contagious until her steps faltered. Her laughter turned into a faint gasp as dizziness overwhelmed her. "I don't feel so good," she murmured, her words faint and unsteady. Suddenly, her knees buckled and she crumpled to the pavement. "Maya!" Her best friend Ava screamed, rushing to her side. "Somebody help, please!" Inside their small, tidy home, Danielle and Marcus Thomas were sharing a quiet moment when they heard the commotion. Rushing outside, their hearts sank at the sight of their daughter lying still on the ground. "Baby!" Danielle cried, running to Maya. Marcus, panic etched across his face, gently lifted his daughter into his arms. "She's burning up," he said, his voice tight with fear. "We've got to get her to the hospital." Danielle grabbed the car keys, and they sped to the nearest emergency room. As the car barreled down the street, Danielle sat in the back seat, whispering prayers and stroking Maya's hair. Marcus gripped the wheel with white knuckles, his jaw set in determination, as he glanced at his daughter through the rearview mirror. When they reached the hospital, Marcus burst through the doors, carrying Maya like a fragile doll. "Our daughter needs help," he pleaded, his voice shaking with urgency. A nurse ushered them into an examination room, offering a small reassurance. "The doctor will be right in." Moments later, Dr. Alan Hayes entered. His crisp white coat and confident stride were at odds with the cold detachment in his eyes. He didn't spare a glance at the terrified parents, focusing solely on the clipboard in his hand. "What's the issue?" he asked, his tone clipped. Danielle's voice wavered as she explained. "She collapsed while playing outside. She's never been this sick before. Please, doctor, help her." Dr. Hayes performed a cursory examination, his movements efficient but void of warmth. Marcus watched him closely, his protective instincts on high alert. When the doctor finished, Marcus couldn't hold back. "What's wrong with her?" he asked, his voice trembling. Dr. Hayes looked at the family, his expression unreadable. "I'm afraid I can't help," he said flatly. Danielle's face crumpled. "What do you mean? She's just a little girl." "Our resources are limited," Dr. Hayes replied, his tone clinical. "We have to prioritize patients with better outcomes." "Better outcomes?" Marcus's voice rose, a mixture of disbelief and anger. "She's our daughter. She's a child." Dr. Hayes maintained his cold demeanor, avoiding Marcus's fiery gaze. "There are other patients who need our attention more urgently. I suggest you take her home and let her rest." Danielle's sobs filled the room as she clutched Maya's limp hand. Marcus stepped closer to Dr. Hayes, desperation etched into his face. "Please," he whispered. "She's all we have." But Dr. Hayes had already turned to leave, his decision final. Left in despair, Danielle and Marcus huddled together, their tears falling as they stared at their unconscious daughter. In the hallway, Dr. Rachel Carter overheard the exchange. She paused, her heart sinking at the cold dismissal she had just witnessed. Dr. Carter was new to the hospital, her passion for medicine still burning brightly despite the challenges she faced. She glanced through the door at the devastated family and knew she couldn't stand by. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the room. "Excuse me," she said gently. "I'm Dr. Carter. May I take a look at your daughter?" Danielle and Marcus stared at her, their faces streaked with tears. "Please," Danielle whispered. "Please help her." Dr. Carter knelt beside Maya, her touch firm yet tender. "She's burning up," she murmured after a brief examination. "We need to act quickly." She called for a nurse and began issuing instructions. "Let's start an IV and get a full panel of labs. We need to stabilize her now." Danielle clung to Marcus, their hope reigniting as they watched Dr. Carter take control. For the first time that day, they felt a glimmer of reassurance. Hours passed in tense silence as Dr. Carter worked tirelessly to stabilize Maya. Danielle and Marcus clung to each other in the waiting room, their hearts heavy with worry but buoyed by the young doctor's determination. Finally, Dr. Carter emerged, her face showing both exhaustion and relief. "She's stable," Dr. Carter announced with a small smile. "We've managed to bring her fever down and start treatment for an infection. She's not out of the woods yet, but we're admitting her for further care." Danielle collapsed into Marcus's arms, sobbing tears of relief. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what this means to us." Dr. Carter nodded, her eyes warm with compassion. "Maya's a fighter. We'll do everything we can to help her recover." As she turned to leave, Dr. Carter came face to face with Dr. Hayes. His expression was stern, his presence imposing as he looked at the family and then at Dr. Carter. "What do you think you're doing?" Dr. Hayes asked, his voice low and sharp. "I made a decision regarding this patient." Dr. Carter stood her ground, her voice steady. "I'm doing what's right, Dr. Hayes. This child needed urgent care, and I provided it." "You've overstepped," Dr. Hayes replied, his tone icy. "There will be consequences for your insubordination." Dr. Carter squared her shoulders, meeting his glare. "With all due respect, every life deserves dignity and care. I couldn't stand by while a little girl was left to suffer." Danielle and Marcus watched the exchange with bated breath, their gratitude for Dr. Carter growing with each word she spoke. Dr. Hayes, clearly frustrated, turned and stormed off without another word. A soft voice broke the tension. "Mommy? Daddy?" Danielle and Marcus turned to see Maya's eyes fluttering open. They rushed to her bedside, their tears turning to ones of joy. "We're here, baby," Danielle said, stroking Maya's cheek. "You're going to be okay." As the family reunited, Dr. Carter stood nearby, her heart full. "This is why we became doctors," she whispered to herself, the sight of the family's joy reaffirming her purpose. In the following days, Maya's recovery was steady. Dr. Carter visited her every day, bringing her gentle smile and patient explanations about her care. Maya grew fond of the doctor, often asking endless questions about medicine and how it all worked. One afternoon, as Dr. Carter was checking Maya's vitals, the young girl's face lit up with excitement. "Dr. Carter," Maya said, her voice still soft but brimming with determination. "I want to be just like you when I grow up." Dr. Carter paused, touched by the sincerity in Maya's words. "Oh? What do you mean, sweetie?" Maya sat up straighter. "I want to be a doctor. I want to help people like you helped me. I don't want anyone to feel scared or left out." Danielle and Marcus exchanged emotional glances. Dr. Carter smiled warmly, placing a hand on Maya's. "That's a wonderful dream, Maya. I believe you'll make an incredible doctor someday." Meanwhile, whispers of Dr. Hayes's actions spread through the hospital. His once pristine reputation was tarnished as staff, and patients alike began to question his character. Nurses spoke in hushed tones during their breaks, and colleagues gave him cold stares in the hallways. Dr. Hayes noticed the shift. He felt the weight of the disapproving looks, the abrupt silences when he entered a room. His irritation grew, manifesting in sharp reprimands to staff and an even colder demeanor. Alone in his office, he wrestled with the faint stirrings of doubt. Had he made the right decision? His mind replayed Dr. Carter's words, but he quickly pushed the thought away. "Resources are limited," he muttered to himself, justifying his actions. "Tough choices have to be made." On the day of Maya's discharge, the hospital room buzzed with excitement. Danielle and Marcus packed up her belongings, their hearts light for the first time in weeks. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, swinging her legs and smiling brightly. Dr. Carter entered the room, carrying a clipboard and wearing her usual warm smile. "Well, Maya, today's the big day. Are you ready to go home?" Maya nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Doctor." "Carter, I can't wait to sleep in my own bed." Danielle turned to Doctor. "Carter, tears of gratitude filling her eyes. "We can never thank you enough for what you've done for our family," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Dr. Carter placed a gentle hand on Danielle's shoulder. "It's been an honor to care for Maya. She's a very special girl." Maya approached Dr. Carter and hugged her tightly. "Thank you for saving me, Dr. Carter. I'm going to be a doctor just like you when I grow up. I promise I'll help everyone, no matter who they are." Dr. Carter knelt down, looking into Maya's earnest eyes. "I believe in you, Maya. You're going to do amazing things." Maya's return home marked the beginning of a new chapter for her and her family. Though her body was still weak, her spirit seemed stronger than ever. Her days were filled with rest and careful recovery, but her mind was constantly buzzing with ideas about her future. The once carefree girl now carried a spark of determination that hadn't been there before. Back at school, Maya's classmates and teachers noticed the change immediately. During lessons, her hand was always the first to shoot up with questions, and during recess she often sat under a tree reading books about science and the human body instead of playing tag. Her teachers encouraged her enthusiasm, lending her additional resources and nurturing her curiosity. "Maya, you've been working so hard lately," her fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Harris, said one day after class. "Is everything okay?" Maya smiled, her eyes alight with purpose. "I'm fine, Mrs. Harris. I just want to learn as much as I can. I've decided I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up." Mrs. Harris's face softened with admiration. "That's a wonderful goal, Maya. I know you have what it takes to make it happen." At home, Danielle and Marcus supported Maya's dreams in every way they could. They bought her age-appropriate science books, took her to the local library, and even found children's anatomy kits for her to explore. Though they were proud of her determination, they also worried about the challenges ahead. One evening, as Maya sat at the kitchen table with her nose buried in a book about the circulatory system, Danielle placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Sweetheart, your dad and I are so proud of you. But remember, it's okay to take breaks." Maya looked up, her face serious. "I know, Mom, but I made a promise to Dr. Carter, and to myself. I want to help people the way she helped me." Danielle nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "We'll always support you, no matter what." As the years passed, Maya's passion for medicine only grew stronger. By the time she entered high school, she was a straight-A student, excelling in every subject, but especially in biology and chemistry. However, the realities of her dream began to loom larger. Maya knew medical school was expensive, and her parents, while supportive, weren't in a financial position to cover such costs. One evening, Danielle and Marcus sat Maya down for a heart-to-heart talk. "Maya," Marcus began, his voice heavy, "your mom and I are so proud of how hard you're working, but medical school is very expensive. We want to be honest with you. It might be hard for us to afford it on our own." Maya felt a pang of worry, but quickly straightened her shoulders. "It's okay, Dad. I'll figure it out. I'll get scholarships. I'll work hard. I promise I'll make it happen." True to her word, Maya threw herself into her studies with even more determination. She stayed up late reviewing textbooks, volunteered at a local clinic, and joined the science club at school. She also began tutoring younger students after school to earn extra money, a small but meaningful step toward her goal. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Teachers praised her drive, and counselors guided her toward scholarship opportunities. By her senior year, Maya had filled out countless applications, written dozens of essays, and attended multiple interviews. The day her first acceptance letter arrived was unforgettable. Maya's hands trembled as she opened the envelope, her parents hovering anxiously nearby. Tears welled up in her eyes as she read the words. Full scholarship awarded. Danielle and Marcus embraced their daughter, their pride and relief palpable. "You did it," Danielle whispered, her voice breaking. "We always knew you would." With her scholarship secured, Maya stepped into the halls of a prestigious medical school, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. The campus was vast, the buildings grand and imposing. Though she felt like a small fish in a big pond, Maya reminded herself of the journey that had brought her here, and the promise she had made to Dr. Carter. Medical school was grueling, but Maya thrived. Her passion and determination set her apart, earning her the respect of professors and peers alike. Late nights in the library and long hours in the lab became her new normal, but she embraced every challenge with the same fierce dedication that had driven her since that pivotal moment in her childhood. Years later, Maya, now Dr. Maya Thomas, found herself walking through the halls of the very hospital where her life had once hung in the balance. The memories of that day, the coldness of Dr. Hayes, the compassion of Dr. Carter, were still vivid in her mind. She had come full circle, and as she donned her white coat and prepared to meet her first patients, she knew one thing for certain. She would honor the promise she made as a young girl. Every patient, no matter their background or circumstances, would receive the care and dignity they deserved. And in a quiet office not far away, Dr. Hayes sat alone, his career and reputation diminished. Though he wouldn't admit it aloud, he often thought about the brave little girl who had grown into a remarkable doctor. Perhaps, in some way, she was the lesson he hadn't known he needed. The sudden escalation caused a surge of panic. Blood spurted from the nicked artery, staining the sterile drapes and triggering a cascade of alarms from the monitors. Gasps erupted from the team as the boy's vitals began to plummet. "Clamp it!" Maya barked, her voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. Her eyes darted between the wound and the monitors, her expression resolute despite the rising stakes. "You're admitting your mistake, and that's a start." Dr. Hayes looked up, his eyes filled with a glimmer of hope. "Does that mean you forgive me?" he asked hesitantly. Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. "Forgiveness isn't something I can give easily," she said. "What you did hurt my family deeply, but I also believe people can change, and I can see that you've carried this guilt for a long time." The weight of her words hung between them, heavy but honest. Dr. Hayes nodded slowly. "Thank you for listening," he said. "That means more than you know." In the days that followed, Maya found herself reflecting on her interaction with Dr. Hayes. She couldn't deny the anger she felt, but she also couldn't ignore the sincerity of his apology. She resolved to focus on the present, pouring her energy into her patients and the hospital community. Meanwhile, Dr. Hayes began to take small steps toward redemption. Inspired by Maya's unwavering compassion, he started volunteering for cases that involved underserved patients. He also attended workshops on implicit bias, determined to confront and unlearn the prejudices that had once controlled his decisions. Though their interactions remained professional, Maya began to notice subtle changes in Dr. Hayes. He spoke more kindly to patients, took extra time to explain procedures, and even mentored younger doctors with a newfound sense of humility. The transformation didn't erase the past, but it was a step in the right direction. Months later, the hospital held its annual award ceremony, celebrating outstanding contributions by staff. Maya was named Physician of the Year, an honor that left her parents beaming with pride as they watched from the audience. When she stepped onto the stage to accept her award, she paused for a moment, scanning the crowd. "My journey to this point wasn't easy," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "There were moments in my life when I felt invisible, when I was told I didn't matter. But those moments didn't define me. They fueled me." Her eyes found Dr. Hayes in the audience. Though his face was unreadable, she could see the tension in his posture. "I learned that compassion and care can change lives," Maya continued, "and I carry that lesson with me every day. To anyone who feels overlooked or dismissed, know that you matter. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to be cared for." The audience erupted into applause, a standing ovation filling the room. Maya accepted the award with grace, her heart swelling with gratitude for how far she had come. "After the ceremony, Doctor," Hayes approached Maya quietly. "Congratulations, Dr. Williams," he said, his voice tinged with genuine admiration. Maya looked at him, her gaze thoughtful. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes," she replied. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a small but meaningful nod, Maya added, "And thank you for trying to be better. That matters too." Dr. Hayes's eyes glistened with emotion as he nodded in return. It wasn't absolution, but it was acknowledgement, and for him, it was enough. As Maya continued to rise through the ranks of the medical field, she carried her past with her, not as a burden, but as a reminder of the power of resilience and the importance of kindness. Her story inspired colleagues, patients, and aspiring doctors alike, proving that even the most painful beginnings could lead to extraordinary endings. And somewhere in the same hospital, a once prejudiced doctor worked tirelessly to rewrite his own story, one patient at a time. Years passed, and Dr. Maya Williams became a beacon of hope and a symbol of change within the medical community. Her tireless efforts to advocate for underserved patients earned her recognition far beyond the walls of Central City Hospital. She was invited to speak at conferences, mentor medical students, and even contribute to healthcare policy initiatives aimed at increasing equity and access. Maya's story resonated deeply, not just because of her accomplishments, but because of the humility and empathy she brought to her work. She never shied away from sharing the hardships that had shaped her journey, always emphasizing the importance of compassion in medicine. One afternoon, Maya was preparing for a presentation at a national healthcare summit. The topic was personal to her: breaking barriers in patient care. As she reviewed her notes, a knock on her office door interrupted her. "Come in," Maya called, looking up to see Dr. Hayes standing hesitantly in the doorway. "Dr. Williams," he began, his tone cautious. "I heard you're speaking at the summit tomorrow." Maya smiled politely. "I am. It's an honor to share my perspective with a larger audience." Dr. Hayes stepped further into the room, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. "I just wanted to say, you've made an incredible impact here at the hospital, and beyond. I know I'm probably the last person who deserves to say this, but I'm proud of you." The words caught Maya off guard. She studied him for a moment, noting the genuine emotion in his voice. It was a stark contrast to the cold, distant man she had first encountered as a child. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes," she replied, her tone warm but measured. "That means a lot." The next day, Maya stood on a stage before a packed auditorium. Her speech was a powerful call to action, urging medical professionals to confront biases, prioritize empathy, and strive for systemic change. As she spoke, she felt the weight of her journey, the struggles, the triumphs, and the lessons she had learned along the way. "I stand here today because someone believed in me," Maya said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "And because I believed in the power of compassion. Every patient is a story, a life, a dream worth fighting for. We have the power to make a difference, not just with our skills, but with our hearts." The audience erupted into applause, many rising to their feet in admiration. Among them was Dr. Hayes, who watched with a mixture of awe and deep reflection. For the first time in his career, he felt truly humbled, not by his mistakes, but by the realization that redemption was possible, even in the shadow of those mistakes. Back at Central City Hospital, Maya continued to lead with the same unwavering commitment to excellence and equity. She worked closely with administrators to implement policies that improved patient care for marginalized communities. Under her guidance, the hospital became a model for inclusivity and innovation. One day, Maya received a letter from a young girl who had attended one of her community workshops. The letter was scrawled in bright purple ink, the handwriting uneven but full of enthusiasm. "Dear Dr. Williams," it read, "I want to be a doctor just like you when I grow up. You make me believe I can help people and make the world better. Thank you for being so nice and teaching us so much." Maya's heart swelled as she read the letter. It was a reminder of the ripple effect her work had created, a chain of inspiration that would carry forward into the next generation of healers. In the years that followed, Maya's legacy grew. Her influence reached far beyond the confines of Central City Hospital, shaping the future of medicine in ways she had never imagined. Yet, despite her many accolades, she remained grounded, always returning to the core of her mission, to ensure that no one was ever left to feel invisible, helpless, or alone. As for Dr. Hayes, he quietly retired a few years after Maya's promotion. Though his departure was unceremonious, he left the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. He had spent his final years striving to make amends, mentoring young doctors and supporting initiatives that aligned with the values Maya embodied. It wasn't redemption in the traditional sense, but it was a step toward healing, for himself and for those he had wronged. One evening, Maya found herself reflecting on her journey as she stood in her office, gazing out at the city skyline. The framed photo of her and Dr. Carter still sat on her desk, a constant source of inspiration. "I hope I've made you proud," she whispered, her thoughts drifting to the woman who had saved her life so many years ago. Though Dr. Carter was no longer alive, her legacy lived on in every life Maya touched. Maya smiled softly, feeling a sense of peace. The road ahead was still long, and there was much work to be done, but she was ready for it. With every step she took, she carried the lessons of her past, the strength of her present, and the hope of a brighter future for all. Dr. Hayes stared at the young patient's chart on his desk, his hands still trembling from the surgery earlier that day. The memory of Maya's swift action in the operating room lingered in his mind, her calm command saving the boy's life after his critical mistake. It wasn't just her precision as a surgeon that had struck him. It was her grace under pressure and the way she led the team, ensuring everyone played their part to stabilize the patient. As he sat there, a deep shame washed over him. The contrast between her brilliance and his failure was overwhelming. How had it come to this? He thought, replaying the day's events over and over. The Maya of today, the accomplished doctor revered by patients and colleagues alike, was a far cry from the frightened little girl he had once dismissed so cruelly. He thought back to their conversation earlier, her words resonating in his mind. "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we grow from them." Those words carried a weight he could hardly bear. He realized he was no longer just living under the shadow of his past actions. He was also burdened by the fear that he might fail again. But this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about making things right. He knew he had to change, not just to alleviate his guilt, but because Maya deserved to see the man who had wronged her become better. One day, the hospital director summoned both Maya and Dr. Hayes to a meeting. The director's office was bright and orderly, with walls lined with awards and plaques commemorating decades of medical excellence. As Maya and Dr. Hayes took their seats, the director smiled warmly. "You two have done something extraordinary here," the director began. "Your partnership has not only improved patient outcomes, but also transformed the culture of this hospital." Maya glanced at Dr. Hayes, who looked slightly uncomfortable with the praise, though a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "I've been thinking," the director continued, "about how we can use your work as a model for other departments. Would you be willing to lead a series of workshops on collaborative care and patient advocacy?" Maya's eyes lit up. "I'd be honored," she said enthusiastically. She turned to Dr. Hayes. "What do you think?" Dr. Hayes hesitated for a moment before nodding. "If it means we can inspire others to prioritize compassion and teamwork, then count me in." The workshops became an instant success. Doctors, nurses, and administrators from across the region attended, eager to learn from Maya and Dr. Hayes. Their sessions focused on breaking down hierarchies, fostering open communication, and putting patients at the center of every decision. As the workshops continued, Maya and Dr. Hayes' bond deepened. Despite their rocky start, they had developed a mutual respect that transcended their differences. Over late nights planning presentations and early morning rounds, they shared stories about their journeys, their struggles, and their hopes for the future. One evening, after a particularly inspiring workshop, Dr. Hayes confided in Maya. "You know," he began, his voice contemplative, "I used to think being a doctor was about being the best, the smartest, the one who always had the answers." Maya tilted her head, listening intently. "But you've shown me that it's about so much more than that." he continued. It's about connection, empathy, and the willingness to admit when you've been wrong. Maya smiled softly. We've all had to learn those lessons, Dr. Hayes. And we're better doctors for it. Dr. Hayes nodded, his expression thoughtful. I just wish I'd learned them sooner. As the months went by, the impact of Maya and Dr. Hayes' work became evident throughout the hospital. Morale among the staff improved, and patient satisfaction ratings reached new heights. The hospital was even recognized with a national award for excellence in patient care, a testament to the transformation that had taken place under their leadership. One day, Maya received an invitation to deliver the keynote address at a prestigious medical conference. The theme of the conference was Healing Beyond Medicine, the Power of Compassion in Healthcare. As Maya prepared her speech, she reflected on her journey. She thought about the challenges she had faced as a child, the mentors who had guided her, and the unlikely friendship that had blossomed with Dr. Hayes. Her story was one of resilience, redemption, and the belief that change was always possible. On the day of the conference, Maya stood backstage, her nerves buzzing with anticipation. When her name was announced, the audience erupted into applause. She took the stage, her heart full as she gazed out at the sea of faces before her. Good afternoon, she began, her voice steady and warm. I stand before you today not just as a doctor, but as someone who has witnessed the profound impact that compassion can have, not just on patients, but on us as caregivers. She shared the story of her childhood, the pivotal moment that had inspired her to pursue medicine, and the lessons she had learned along the way. She spoke about the power of forgiveness, the importance of collaboration, and the need for empathy in every aspect of healthcare. As doctors, we are entrusted with more than just the responsibility to heal, Maya said, her voice filled with conviction. We are entrusted with the opportunity to listen, to care, and to remind every patient that they are seen and valued. The audience gave her a standing ovation, moved by her words and inspired by her vision for a more compassionate healthcare system. Dr. Hayes watched from the audience, his chest swelling with pride. As he listened to Maya's speech, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the second chance he had been given. He thought about how far they had come, from a moment of unforgivable neglect to a partnership that had changed lives. After the conference, Dr. Hayes approached Maya, his expression solemn but warm. That was incredible, he said. You've become everything I always hoped to be as a doctor. Maya smiled, her eyes shining with humility. And you've become someone I'm proud to call my colleague and my friend. The hospital continued to thrive under Maya and Dr. Hayes' leadership. Together, they pushed for policies that promoted equity and inclusion, ensuring that every patient who walked through their doors received the care and dignity they deserved. Their story became a beacon of hope for others, a reminder that even the deepest wounds could heal, and that change was always possible with determination, humility, and a little bit of grace. The transformation of Central City Hospital became a blueprint for others across the country. Medical institutions sought advice from Maya and Dr. Hayes on creating inclusive care models. Their work inspired new training programs for doctors, emphasizing cultural competency, empathy, and patient-centered care. Maya's role at the hospital evolved as she took on leadership responsibilities, overseeing multiple departments while continuing her hands-on work with patients. Despite her growing influence, she remained deeply connected to the people she served, never losing sight of the values that had driven her to pursue medicine. One day, Maya received a surprise visitor. A young girl, no older than 10, stood nervously outside her office, clutching a notebook. Beside her was her mother, who smiled apologetically. "Dr. Williams," the mother said, "I hope we're not bothering you. My daughter Sophia insisted we come to see you. She wanted to thank you in person." Maya knelt to meet Sophia's gaze, her warm smile putting the girl at ease. "Hi, Sophia. What's this all about?" Sophia opened her notebook to a carefully drawn picture of Maya in her white coat, surrounded by smiling patients. Above the image, she had written, When I grow up, I want to be just like Dr. Williams. Maya felt a lump form in her throat as she looked at the drawing. "This is beautiful, Sophia," she said softly. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Sophia beamed. "I want to help people, just like you." Maya reached out, gently placing a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "You can do anything you set your mind to, Sophia. Keep dreaming big, okay?" As the girl and her mother left, Maya sat back in her chair, her heart full. Moments like these reminded her of the ripple effect of kindness and determination. The journey she had started so long ago was now inspiring others to follow in her footsteps. Meanwhile, Dr. Hayes continued to embrace his role as a mentor and advocate. He spent much of his time working with interns and medical students, sharing his story as a cautionary tale and a testament to the power of change. He often reminded them that medicine wasn't just about diagnoses and procedures, it was about people. One day, during a training session, a young resident approached him. "Dr. Hayes," the resident began hesitantly, "I've heard stories about your past. Is it true you used to be different?" Dr. Hayes nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's true," he admitted. "I wasn't the doctor I should have been. I made mistakes, some that I'll regret for the rest of my life. But I've learned that it's never too late to change." The resident listened intently, clearly moved. "Thank you for being honest," they said. "It means a lot to know that even seasoned doctors can learn and grow." Dr. Hayes smiled. "We're all learning, every day. And that's what makes us better." As the years went by, Maya and Dr. Hayes' partnership left a lasting legacy at Central City Hospital. Their work led to the establishment of new programs aimed at addressing health disparities, including mobile clinics that brought care to underserved neighborhoods and scholarships for aspiring doctors from diverse backgrounds. The hospital became a model of what healthcare could be, a place where every patient felt valued, every doctor felt supported, and every staff member worked together toward a common goal. Maya's reputation continued to grow on a national level. She was invited to join panels, write articles for medical journals, and advise on healthcare policy. Despite her busy schedule, she never lost sight of her roots, always returning to the hospital to care for her patients and mentor the next generation of doctors. Dr. Hayes, too, found fulfillment in his work. Though he preferred to stay out of the spotlight, he quietly became one of the hospital's most beloved figures. Patients trusted him, colleagues respected him, and students admired him for his wisdom and humility. One day, as Maya and Dr. Hayes walked through the hospital together, they stopped to admire a new plaque that had been installed in the lobby. It read, "In honor of those who dedicate their lives to compassion, healing, and the pursuit of equity in healthcare." Maya smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "We've come a long way," she said softly. Dr. Hayes nodded, "And there's still so much to do." They stood there for a moment, reflecting on their journey. From the darkest days of their past to the bright future they had built together, their story was one of redemption, resilience, and the power of forgiveness. Years later, as Maya prepared to retire, she received an invitation to deliver a commencement speech at a prestigious medical school. She accepted, viewing it as an opportunity to share the lessons she had learned over her remarkable career. Standing before the graduating class, Maya spoke from the heart. "Medicine is about more than knowledge and skill," she said. "It's about empathy, integrity, and the willingness to admit when we're wrong. It's about lifting others up and building a world where everyone has access to the care they deserve." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring the next generation of healers to carry forward her legacy of compassion and excellence. As for Dr. Hayes, he continued to serve his community until the end of his career. Though he never sought recognition, those who worked alongside him knew the profound impact he had made, not just on the hospital, but on the lives of countless patients and colleagues. Together, Maya and Dr. Hayes had proven that even the deepest divides could be bridged through understanding, growth, and a shared commitment to making the world a better place.